So I got really excited this morning because I was reading through Apocalypse Explained, and I think I discovered something like pieces of a work that was always thought to be missing. Swedenborg, in this preface to Doctrine of the Lord, lists, I think, 9 works that he's going to do. He's going to do a work on the Lord, sacred scripture, on the Ten Commandments, on faith, on the spiritual world, and then he mentions 4 others: divine providence, and then a work titled Divine Omnipotence, Omnipresence, Omniscience, Infinity, and Eternity, and then Divine Love and Wisdom, and then another work about life, which is weird that there's 2 things about life in this list. The work on 10 Commandments is also titled about life. So, of those 9, he only published 7 of them, even though he said he was commanded by the Lord to do them. So someone wrote to him later in 1767 and said, hey, you never, published that thing about omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, infinity, and eternity. What's going on? Swedenborg said, well, it's kind of abstract, and I decided to just roll it into certain passages. And he mentioned certain passages in Divine Love and Wisdom, Divine Providence, and Apocalypse Revealed, where he did talk about that. So, in the NCE essay volume, the New Century Edition did a list of essays, a series of essays, and we have a list in the back of Swedenborg's works, and we talk about, there's a list of works that we label with an X, X3, X5, and X7 is this projected work on divine qualities because he never wrote it. This work on angelic wisdom about divine omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, infinity, and eternity. So imagine my excitement when I think I found part of this missing work this morning. It's the kind of thing that only a really severe geek would be interested in. But I actually found a chunk of it, and how it comes about seemed really amazing. Swedenborg did a work before Doctrine of the Lord that he left in manuscript, an explanation of the book of Revelation called Apocalypse Explained. And he abandons it in 19 verse 10, even though Revelation has 22 chapters. He just suddenly drops it like a hot potato. And this has been one of the great questions in Swedenborg's scholarship. Why did he drop that work? So I've been reading the work to try to see why did he drop it, and going through, section after section. And I'm almost toward the end. I'm like about an hour to go to finish it. And I was reading it this morning. And the way he structures the work at this point, he has a little bit where he'll talk about what the Bible means, and that's getting smaller and smaller. It used to be huge earlier in the book. He'd spend all day about it, pages and pages and pages. But here, he's just spending a tiny little bit on each verse, and then he has like a digression. He calls them continuation. And so he'll have a digression on a different subject, and these will continue. So he gets on a riff about the Athanasian Creed for a while, and a whole bunch of those come along like that. Then he gets into a riff about just various different things about God or what have you. And the riff that he was in this morning that I was reading about was all about animals and plants. It was really interesting about how animals actually have a spiritual soul and that plants have a spiritual soul and stuff. It was really interesting to me. And so he's going along doing that, and we're all fine. And in number 1215, he's still writing about that stuff. And then in number 1216, the very next number, explains a little bit about the book of Revelation. Then he says this: infinity and eternity, also providence and omnipotence, as belonging to the Lord, have been treated of. That's the old sort of translation language for, okay, now we've dealt with that. Now we'll move on. He says, now the omnipresence and omniscience that belong to him shall be treated of. Oh, wait a minute. I look back in the book. I've been reading the whole thing. He didn't treat of that. On the face of it right there, that's a lie. I mean, he hasn't been talking about that. What is going, all of a sudden in the middle of the book, he's got, or just toward the end, but all of a sudden you've got this thing that barges into the text where he says, I already treated of this. Now I'm going to turn to this other subject. It's weird. It's really, really weird because he hasn't talked about it. And listen to this. At the end of that same number, 1216, subsection 4, he says, it is important that this treatise on the divine attributes should be continued as it was begun. Here then the divine omnipresence and the divine omniscience shall be considered, and then explains why. So he's talking about omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, and infinity and eternity. This is the book, isn't it? Isn't it a little chunk of the missing book? And it seems like he must have had that book on his desk somewhere. I mean, in a draft form, just writing. Some of the things he wrote at that time, he was just writing on loose sheets of paper. And we know that from various things. And so is he writing stuff? He's sort of riffing about this, and he decided, okay, I'll fold this in. But where did the other part of it go? We don't have it anymore. Swedenborg was shockingly unsentimental about his work. Every time he would publish a book, it seems that he would just destroy the manuscript, because with practically everything he published, we don't have any manuscript anymore. He got rid of it. And it seems like he must have gotten rid of these other pages of this work, because he says it's important that this treatise on the divine attributes should be continued as it began. This is the first time in these continuation sections that he's ever mentioned the words divine attributes. I went right to my laptop and looked it up. The first time he ever mentions it. And he goes on for a little while about these qualities, in these same things at the end of each passage. He's going on about omnipotence and omnipresence. And then interestingly to me, at the end of all this, he says, where is it? The divine, this is in number 1229 now, and 1229 is like right at the cliff when the whole thing stops. In the continuation, he says, the divine attributes, which are infinity, eternity, providence, omnipotence, omnipresence, and omniscience, have been treated of. Not really. And then he says, the divine love and the divine wisdom, from which is the life of all things, and of which the above attributes are predicated, shall now be treated of. And then he says, first we got to talk about divine love, and he lays out 15 points that he's going to address, and then the book crashes to a halt. And he never gets to it. He never gets to divine wisdom. I mean, he does get to it in other works, and we have divine love and wisdom. And so the whole idea, and you can see from that preface to the Lord, that work on the Lord, that he was planning to talk about divine providence first, then all these omnis, the omniscience, the omnipotence, and omnipresence, and then he was going to talk about divine love and wisdom. But somehow he cut to the chase and he put divine love and wisdom first, then did divine providence, and never got to this other book. And I truly believed that nothing of this survived. But now I got to go back and fix this volume that we wrote, because we should say something in there about, hey, if you want a few fragments of this, look in AE 1216 to 1228 or 1229, because we have a chunk of this missing work, but you can tell. And some people have recognized that there was stuff in Apocalypse Explained, that I keep calling AE, that has some connection to this work on the three omnis, or whatever you want to call it. But they don't seem to acknowledge that it was a chunk and it was from the end. He says, now that's begun, it's fitting that we come to this at the end. It was probably going to be a short work, because everything from that time period was short, but it intrigues the heck out of me. And what did he do? Did he leave it on the desk? Did he burn it? Did it get wrapped in some other book or something like that? This does not survive, and this is the first I've heard of it, and maybe the first anybody sort of really, I don't know. It's just exciting when you make a discovery like this. So much of life is drudgery, isn't it, friends? Tramping along day after day. So it's exciting. No, don't feel sorry for me. I have the best job ever. But it's very exciting. It adds the excitement when you find something that you thought was lost. And there's a chunk of it. You can see some of it, and it's in whole sentences, whole paragraphs. It's not just an outline, bullet form. You've got a serious chunk of it right here. It exists.